morning, good morning, good morning. It is Monday, 11:30. It's your first session of the week for Good Life Fitness, live on Instagram. And it's me, Fashion Stretch Simon Page from the Good Life Fitness personal training team, taking you through a little bit of hip work today with our workout. So if you just joined us for the first time, welcome. This is a mobility session, especially for you. If you join us for the multiple occasions that you join us every week, welcome back. And if you're watching us on the replay, thanks for joining us. And we're going to, as I say, work through some hip work today. So you will need a chair or a bench. I'm going to use both actually today. Either one works fine. And we're going to do a little bit of work with the foam roller as well. So starting off today, we're going to do a little bit of kind of check-in and see where we're at, and then we do some hip flexor stretches as well as our core 4 work that we've done many times before. So without further ado, I'm just going to turn off the comments. Nice to see you guys. Thanks very much for the love as always. And we're going to get started. So first thing we're going to do today is we're actually going to use the wall a little bit. We want to check in a couple of areas though. The first one is we're going to check in with our hamstrings. So this one, we don't normally check in, but I always find it's good just to check the mobility of your client. So you want to make sure that your legs are straight, nice kind of back's in kind of a healthy position for you, you're not in any pain, and we're just kind of stretch and see where we get to. As a check-in later, we can always come back to that one. Now, all the stretches that we do, they're always going to be a check-in to see that kind of feedback loop and work out if the stretches that we do are going to be beneficial to you. So always advocate for yourself, always check in and decide if that stretch is going to be good for your routine, and if it's not, remove it. We're not starting with a lacrosse ball like we normally do, but today we're going to do a little bit of hip motion first. So first what we're going to do is we're just going to do a little bit of dynamic hip opener. So this one, I actually really like to do this series in a swimming pool because there's a little bit of weightlessness, a little bit of traction on the hip, and you can get your hip to open up a little bit. So for example, on the downstroke of bringing it down, you get a little bit more work in the hip socket, and that can really help if you are using a swimming pool. So with this one, knees facing forward, we'll bring it out, trying to keep this front knee facing the same direction, we're bringing it down. You can also do this with a straight leg. This also works great. And the other thing is we want to make sure that we're using a wall for support, so we're not leaning all the way over and just losing that extra range that we're getting. So 2 options here. We're working on opening that hip to a 90 and down, or you can do it up, straight out, and down. Either works great, and down, and you can also add a little bit of external rotation if you need to, or internal rotation if you have the range. So it's going to be a straight leg or a bent leg, whichever works best for you. I'm going to try and do this facing the other way with the chair that I have right here, but a wall I think works a little bit better, so I'm going to do this on the other side. So nice and tall, making sure that you have like a good balanced position, making sure your chest is nice and tall as well. Bring that leg out and down, up, out, and down. And as I say, I like to personally do this one in the swimming pool because there's a little bit of resistance as well. Keeps the hip nice and healthy, trying to paint all those angles of the hip socket as you come down. So this one we can do straight, or straight at least as you can get it, up as high as works well for you without leaning too much to the side. Again, this can be done a little bit more dynamically if you're beginning your workout, and you can even do it in reverse if you want to. When you bring the leg up, obviously you want to make sure the toe is pointing out to the side as best you can. It's a good indication of how healthy your hip socket is, how much external rotation you can get. So if you're coming back down this way and then you're coming straight back up and out, we just want to see if you can turn that foot all the way out to the side. So again, a really good indicator if you can get that external rotation. Next piece is we're going to do some hip rotations using a hip aeroplane. So you've seen me do this one before. It's a really healthy way of getting that internal external rotation with a load on the front foot. So again, chair needed for this one, or a wall. You can do this one with a wall. We're going to let's do this one with our right foot first. Okay, so the weight is in our right foot. We're going to hinge from the hip. So I'm pushing this hip back as far as I can away from me, trying to get a little bit of internal rotation off that hip that's off the ground. So I'm turning in towards that other leg, and then I'm going to turn out. So I'm turning my hip out, and as I do that, the foot that's on the floor, I want to make sure that the weight is transferring a little bit to the outside of the foot. So it's not collapsing inwards, I'm not getting that knee collapse, that kind of arch collapse as well. So as I turn in towards you, my foot is going to grip the ground. So I'm lifting my hip up, I'm turning my hip out, and I'm shifting my weight to the outside of my foot. Imagine I'm just kind of forming that tripod with the foot. I'm internally rotating, and then I'm externally rotating. Internal rotation with that foot that's there, and I'm externally rotating. So the idea here is that we're just getting this hip that's planted to rotate with a little bit of downward pressure, trying to get that socket to move, and the hip that's in the air, the hip is just kind of helping to turn out a little bit. So you're getting the front headlights kind of opening up a little bit. I'll show you one more time. So foot is going to come back and down. I will move this forward just a little bit so you can see. So foot is back and down. I'm extending away. My foot that's planted into the floor, I'm making sure I'm forming that foot tripod, and I'm transferring the weight a little bit to the outside of my foot. As I do that, I'm internally rotating, so I should feel a little bit of a stretch on the outside of this side, on my glute med to stabilize, and then external rotation of this leg, and I should feel a little bit of stretch on the inside. So if you do this correctly and you're loading it right, you should get a nice stretch in two places. First of all, it's going to be the glute med on the stand leg, in which case it's the right leg this side. And then we're also going to get a little bit of a stretch on the inside of the hip as I open up on the standing leg too. And you may even get a little bit of a stretch on the leg that's out in front of you. So I'm going to switch around again. I'll run you through it one more time. This again is a great one to do if you're in a swimming pool, because it's going to be less of a gravity force downwards. You can get a little bit more balance, it can be a little bit more dynamic as well. So a good step on from this would be to lose the chair if you get a little bit better with the balance. But I find this one's awesome because it's going to help you with that front of the hip, a little bit of the glute med as well. So it's lateral stabilization if you're having hip issues. So it's going to improve that adductor tension as well. So I'm going to bring, the right foot last time. So we're on the left foot, or you can be on your right foot, whichever works. We're extending the foot away. So just bring that leg back. And I want to make sure I'm stretching my foot out as far as I can. Really getting this glute to do a little bit of work here. And as I do that, I'm just opening up my hip, turning this foot forwards, and then I'm internally rotating, getting this outside hip, this glute med on the left hand side to do some work, planting this foot into the floor, and pushing into the floor, and rotating. And the idea here is, as I say, is to keep this leg back and extended, open up just a little bit, making sure that leg's straight. I'm internally rotating. This is why the chair is always helpful here. And then I'm opening my hip up, getting a little bit of tension on the front of the hip here, and I'm rotating in, keeping that foot out as far as I can. Now you can't do this from a standing position. This could be another good regression for you. If we're planting our front foot down, and then we're internally rotating slightly to get a stretch on the glute med on this side. I'll turn around so you can see. So I'm getting a little bit of a stretch here, and then I can turn my body outward slightly, keep my balance, turning in, and then slightly turning out this way. Same sort of thing, but it's a little bit better if we're getting more of a direct downward load into that hip, can provide a little bit more stabilization. So we've started with a little bit of stability work, because sometimes I find clients tend to stretch things when they should be stabilizing. Hopefully that chair stays where it is. I'll move it. I find that clients should be stretching or are stretching and mobilizing when they should be stabilizing first. So If you feel a little bit more stable in the hips, you feel like you have a little bit more range now. So we can try and lean down to a check-in. Feel a little bit less tension, but that's just the start. So we are going to do a little bit of hip flexor rolling first. So we're just going to do a little bit of work around the TFL actually first for the lateral stabilizers, and then we're going to do a little bit on the front as well. So coming down to the floor, you can lay across this foam roller on the side. Want to be about where the top of the pocket is on the corner of the shorts. So top of the pocket, we're just going to try and get as much weight as we can, just so we can passively stretch that hip. We can bring this back leg back to stabilize, or you can bring it out in front, whichever works for you. But the main thing here is we're putting our force downwards into this top of the pocket, around the hip area, and if you need to, you can put your arm up, or you can bring your leg across the set, whichever works for you. And if you have some yoga blocks, that also works too. So idea here is we're going to lift this bottom leg up just a little bit, just to add a little bit of pressure too. It's going to lengthen the body. You can also push up on the side to lengthen that position too. And we're just going to bring that leg up and down and around, just for a stretch. Now we're going to do the same thing, but we're going to turn over to add a little bit more pressure on the front of the hip. We're just going to switch our body position, and we're just going to sit passively in this position. So you can actually spend a little bit of time here just breathing to help loosen up your hip. And if you want to go a little bit higher towards your belly button, that also works great too. But here we're just going to lift our leg up straight. We're kind of pumping this position just to see if we can get a little bit looser. And if you need to change positions, feel free to. Sometimes I also like to do this one just hanging off the side of the foam roller, because I can just hit that area specifically. So that also works. And we're just going to bring our leg up. Now, let's do it on the other side. I will change positions so you can see. But again, we're targeting this top of the pocket kind of area, around the top of the hip, where the tissue kind of meets that hip bone. But also on this side of the top of the bone here, that TFL, that's the one that feeds into the IT band, which is why it's so important to kind of loosen up. This is the muscle that controls that tension in the tissue around that area. So, gonna lay across the foam roller, just adding a little bit of downward pressure. My bottom leg is gonna lift a little bit, okay? So if you can see my foot now there, it's probably a better view for you. We're just lifting the leg a little bit. We can also apply a little bit more downward pressure if we need to, just sinking our body down so we kind of relax into it. And that can also help. So you get that combination of downward pressure and a stretch from the opposite end, distally, and we're kind of lifting that leg. And just remember to move on the out breath. So we take a nice deep breath in, just to relax. Just lifting that leg up, keeping that downward pressure. Adding a little bit more. I'm just moving up the foam roller just a little bit as that tension changes. I'm just getting a little bit lower into the TFL, but the foam roller is moving up. And I'm lifting that leg, keeping that tension. You can also balance yourself just by turning out slightly if you want to. That also works. And you might even hit a little bit the glute med if you open yourself up a little bit more open. So transferring into our hip flexor kind of position. Two options here. Directly across the bone into the middle of your stomach, or you can be a little bit higher so it can be more towards the midline of the belly button. So just sitting on top of this, just laying on top of it, we can lift our leg. Again, same thing as before, just straightening that leg up so there's a little bit more downward pressure, and the pressure that you do have, we're just stretching away from that position. So again, distal stretch. Excellent. And relax. So we're going to move it into our core 4 stretch we've done before. So if you've done the stretch, you've watched some of the replays, you'll probably know this one. We're going to start with a position on the floor that's about shoulder width apart. So we're just going to internally, externally rotate. And because we spent a little bit of time doing some rotational stuff at the very, very start of the session, your hips should already feel a little bit better because you've got some synovial fluid kind of moving around, and you've coated those hips. So pick a side. I'm going to do my left side first. This time I normally do my right, but I think left side's a good place to start. We're going to start with our hands either side of our knee. So we're in this tall position, hearts across the middle of our knee. So as we come forward and down, we're bringing our chin to the ceiling. We're going to imagine we're stretching our head as tall as we can. There's a piece of string coming out the top of our head. We're getting some stretch to the ceiling, and we're leaning forward, and our chin is going to try and brush our knee. So as we come forward, breathing out, rolling up our chest, breathing in, breathe out. And same thing again, we're going to do this about 5 times. We're trying to lengthen the spine as far as we can. And down. So now what we would like to do is imagine we're just moving around the clock. We're going to get a little bit more tension on the outside of this hip. We're also going to get a little bit of tension across the back as well. So you're going to get that QL kind of down to that table, which just kind of loosened up. You might get a little bit of adductors and glutes as well. So we're turning the hip. This is where you get that extra tension from. If you don't quite have the range though, just stay where we are. Just keep going through that motion. And as you do more of this stretch wave technique, you'll find that you should help that hip to loosen out. So now I've added that tension, I've moved around a little bit. Same thing. I'm stretching out, trying to get away from that hip. Two more. Breathing in as I come up the chest. Nice tall spine and down. And then I'm going to move around again. So you could do 3 or 4 positions here. If there's anywhere that's particularly tight, I'm going to show you a little technique in a second that will work for that. So now my hand is in line with my knee. I'm nice and tall. Coming down. Down. Let's do one more. Apologies about the change of the light there. And now we're around the corner. So if you have anywhere that's particularly tight, any areas that are kind of catching, you do a little bit of a scan, and let's say you're stuck around here. We can do a small stretch wave, just a small reach. And that should work great, and just releasing that end of the range hip kind of in that area. Or if there's anything else that's stuck, it should come unstuck as you kind of do those small undulating movements. It can also be a great spine lengthener as well, this one. So hopefully I'm in a good position for a reach. I'm just going to shuffle across. So from this position, we're coming down onto our elbow. This one we're just going to reach up and over first to create a little bit of distance between our hip and our shoulder. And then what we're going to do is we're going to rotate under. So we're going to thread the needle. And as I come under, I'm just pushing the heel that's on the floor down into the floor. I'm also pushing this one to the floor, accentuating that stretch. Breathing out. So I'm breathing in. Breathing out. Breathing in. Breathing out. And we'll do that one more time. Following that hand with the eyes is ideal. So next one we're going to do, if your arm is getting tired, take a break for a second. You can pop a yoga brick underneath. If not, you can go straight into this. If you're watching on replay, obviously you can rewind if you need to. But we'll bring that arm straight over the top. And we're trying to get that hip to the ceiling if we can. If you can lift a little bit through the hip, that also helps the traction as well. This time we're going to come in front. I'm going to try and lengthen and push that shoulder away as much as possible. Bring it around, kind of helicopter position. Try to get that eye kind of following the hand, if that works for you. You can also go the other way, and that can help kind of open up that chest a little bit more. As you get across the head, imagine you're trying to stretch out to the corner and around, and then we're going to come up onto our hands. So this position is good. I always like this one because it's kind of that that kind of stabilization for the shoulder and scapula. We're driving our shoulder down to the floor and back as well. And then I also want you to have a neck stretch with this one too. So you're just gonna look across your shoulder towards your foot, and as you do that, drive your hand into the ground, so a little bit of a wrist stretch. Push your shoulder blade down and push your shoulder down, hand down to the floor. You look across the shoulder towards that foot, you might even get a little bit more of a stretch in the hip as well. So let's do a check-in. Let's see where we are at. Let's see what's happened. See if your hip feels a little bit better on the rotation. And let's go into our right side. So same thing again, instructions aren't going to change. I'm going to come back a little bit more. As I say, instructions aren't going to change. They're pretty much the same thing. We're 5 reps in each position. Idea here is we're stretching up and over. So nice tall position, and if you want to do more reps or jump ahead, feel free to. So nice stretch up through the head, coming down across the knee, and rolling back through the chest as I breathe in, breathe out. Breathing in, breathing out. Breathing out. Breathing in. Breathing out. Let's rotate around. So we're just going to rotate our body slightly. So now we have a new angle to work with. If you don't quite have it, stay with the one that we're just at and just move in small increments. So even if you just move an inch or so or a couple of centimeters, that's fine. We're just going to move around until we feel a little bit of a catch on the hip, a little bit of tension working through. You might even feel a stretch on the front. That's okay. This will kind of catch everything. So nice, tall stretch up. Reaching forward, chest comes up. Rocking back. And back. Again, apologies about the change in the light as we go through this. It's a bit more dynamic because of the placement of the whip in the window there, but it's all good. We're just rocking forward, we're stretching up, we're breathing in, down, and now let's come around one more time. So essentially you could do three different positions if you're just warming up and you want to keep it dynamic. If you're doing a cool down, you can hold it for a little bit longer, or a warm down, I should say, or a warm down stretch. You can do it a little bit longer. You could always do a dynamic too if you wanted to, but you want to work through all the ranges, trying to open everything up. So right now I'm a little bit more open on this side, I have a little more range on my right, so I'm nice and tall. Stretch up. Nice traction through the spine as I try and get as far as I can. Okay, so now coming down onto our elbow again, we're going to reach up and over. So let me just shuffle down a little bit so you can see. We're going to come up and over, reaching right over. We're going to rotate in and out just to kind of see how that lat and that hip feels. We're now going to thread the needle. So we're nice and tall position, looking up towards our hand. Open that chest up. We're coming under. So I should have said, breathe in at the top and breathe out. So we're getting nice and open chest, and we're breathing out. And breathing out. We're gonna reach across the top. This chest is nice and open. If you need to take a break, feel free to. You need to grab a yoga block, feel free to do that too if your elbow's feeling a little bit uncomfortable. We're going to come open first this time. Just going to watch that hand and following it around, all the way around, all the way up and over, stretching, tractioning down towards the hip, and then opening my chest all the way up I'm going to come back, stretching over the top a little bit more this time, over, all the way down to the bottom pocket. We're just going to do that 2 more times. Around, stretching the chest, 1 more time, up, over, and around. And I'm going to come up to that start position. I'm driving the shoulder blade down towards the back pocket. I'm also pushing this hand into the floor with a stacked shoulder as I look across my shoulder towards my foot. I'm going to get a little bit of a neck stretch too, as well as a little bit of a stretch of the hips. So from that position, we're just going to do a check-in. We're going to do, we've got time for 1 more hip flexor stretch, so we're going to do a little bit of our couch stretch. So from that position, you can either stabilize your hip, or we can come straight into that hip flexor stretch that we love so much, that couch stretch, where you will need, if you have one, a pillow, which will work great, or I like to use a little foam pad, works fantastic. So if you're not quite there yet, that's fine. You can also do this against the wall over there if you want a little bit of a step further, but you can also use a foam roller or a chair to kind of stabilize, or just a chair if you want to do this one too. The reason it's called a couch stretch is because you do it on the couch. So if you're in front of the couch or sat on the couch watching this, that can also work. So my foot is placed behind me on the couch. I have a nice tall position. So my front leg is at 90 degrees. My back leg is about 90 straight down, and the back leg is kind of pointed about 45. So should feel a nice deep stretch on the front of your hip. If you feel it in your knee, you may just regress this slightly by changing the angle and making your knee more comfortable. So idea with this one is we're going to lean our weight forward, keeping ourselves nice and tall. And you're going to feel a little bit of a hip stretch on the front, maybe even a little bit more into the quad too. And you might even feel a little bit of a stretch in other places too. If you feel any load on the low back though, just back this one off again as well, because you might have really, really tight hip flexors, and we might need to work on that as well next time. So we're just rocking that weight forward onto that front foot. As I said, we're just going to visit this briefly, just to kind of finish off that whole ground-based hip flexor series into the glutes. We're just kind of working into it. So if you've done this one before and it now feels a little bit better, you know how to access this stretch. Works really great just to start off in that core 4 series. We're just rocking forward slightly, keeping that chest nice and tall. We're now going to change sides. So there's a number of things that we can do to change the exercise, including a little bit of a reach over, or reach nice and tall, and then a lean over with your hand on the inside. That's one option. We can also rotate out. That's another option. And you can even do a PNF where that's pushing down into the surface and then coming more into the range. We're just going to hold the stretch today. Those are just a few of the options that you could use, and some of the ones we've covered in the past. So if you want to flick through the previous sessions or message me and I will see if I can find those for you. But they also work great. So chest nice and tall. We're raising either our arm up or we're keeping hands on our hips. And if you want to add any of the spicier elements into it with a rotation or the lean across, pushing your hip out this way, you can also do that too. So for now, we're just leaning slightly forward, feeling where that hip flexor stretch kind of kicks in. Again, making sure that your chest is nice and tall, your head is being pulled up to the ceiling. Imagine that there's kind of an invisible piece of string. And we're just leaning forward, just shifting our weight slightly and just seeing how that feels. So again, we're going to check in a second. We're just going to see how those hamstrings feel, how that mobility feels, how the hips feel, because it's always worth following up again with that dynamic kind of series that we've done before. At the start of the session, there's hip lifts, there's hip aeroplanes, etc. And again, see which side feels better, different, worse. And let's just rock forward slightly, keeping that chest nice and tall. Now again, if you feel any discomfort, any pain, any difficulty with this stretch, it's always worth just adding a pad or a pillow or regressing the stretch. You can even do it against the wall if you're feeling a little bit more adventurous. As you can turn the comments on. We're at the very, very end of the session, but we are going to do a quick check-in So again, come back to your hamstring stretch and see if it's any better. If you gained a couple of inches, if that feels a little less tension, see how that feels for you. And we are back at the same time next week, 11:30. As usual, Mobility Magic next week. And if you have any comments, any feedback, anything you'd like us to cover, please leave a comment in the video replay and post afterwards. And if you're a regular member, thank you very much for joining us. And hopefully that is a great start to your week. So thank you very much, and I look forward to seeing you next week. Ciao.